So the couple of things that have been different for both ATF and DOJ over the last 12 days or so, and some of this we kind of saw coming, is one, as ATF, we are thinking much differently about how we redesign or re-engineer our external-facing website to be much more responsive and interactive to our core constituencies. That's one thing. And two, within DOJ, I think many of you know that soon before the digital government strategy was released, there was also a portfolio stat memo that encouraged all the departments to look at their commodity IT much more closely and look at opportunities for more smartly managing that commodity IT. So within DOJ, we have undertaken a lot of working groups around commodity IT, and specifically with regard to mobility, around what can we do differently, better, more effectively, more cost-effectively in mobility as a department. So those things have happened just recently in DOJ and ATF.
Great. My name is Stephen Buckner. I'm the director for the Center for New Media and Promotion at the Census Bureau. And it's a fairly new office that was put in charge with managing the website along with our IT counterparts. So unlike a lot of agencies, we've split out the responsibility and shared it as a partnership. So as much as the infrastructure gets set up by the CIO, we're trying to challenge them to push ahead and take in some new technology that may not have been cleared yet in the federal government, so that we can push content out to our stakeholders. Now, the Census Bureau's website is over 5 million pages. It's on par with a site of like Amazon or Target. It's very unwieldy, and so we're undergoing a massive web transformation project right now that's been underway for about 9 months. The last 12 days, I had relief in the sense that the new digital strategy didn't say anything that would take us off course, which was really helpful. So it leads us to being validated. We had a lot of research going into our web transformation project that aligns very closely with the federal digital strategy. And I think excitement in the sense that now we have a corporate philosophy that's permeated out across the federal government about what we should be doing. And I think that will help us internally within the Census Bureau and also within the Department of Commerce as we map each one of these things back to what we're doing so that we can push more resources behind it and actually have a timeline for delivering those services to the citizens.
And I'm Lynn Bean. I am a senior advisor to the Deputy Administrator at the Transportation Security Administration. The last 12 days kind of is a relief to us as well. We have launched our mobile app back in 2011. So we are looking at that and ways to improve that and get outreach. We have the balance of both customers who are on the go, so there's a mobile need there. And then we have a workforce, the vast majority who do not sit at a desk, who are in airports, in other locations, on planes. So we have to look at it from both aspects, is how do we take mobile and have it improve the way we do business better for our own people, and how to help travelers help us with security by becoming involved using our mobile app. So we're really excited about it, and also helping it to drive culture. There, as many of you may have, there are pockets in the organization who get mobile, and there are pockets who don't. And I think any reinforcement we can have to help push that this isn't just a small group of people in an agency thinking we should do mobile things, to this is a government-wide effort tied to efficiency, better government, and better work for our citizenry.
Great. Well, I have a whole list of questions here, but I know that you probably have a ton of questions too, so we can jump in if anyone has a question to get started right now.
Are there?
Okay.
Sorry. Herman Hewitt Metrosol System. Are there any?
Mike's coming in.
Are there any
Swarm.
Are there any specific audiences are you targeting? For instance, you talked about transportation, you talked about the census and DOJ when you're looking at mobile optimization, also as it talks to engagement on the website so it becomes more engaging?
Yeah, certainly from our perspective, we have multiple constituencies that we're trying to serve. When we look at mobility specifically, we're looking primarily at our workforce, though, because, as Lynn said, we have a highly mobile workforce. We're about 5,000 employees, but the vast majority of them work outside of a traditional office environment. They have either a law enforcement responsibility or a regulatory responsibility, and most of that work doesn't happen in the office. So when we talk about mobile enablement and giving our employees better tools for doing their job, that's the target audience that we're focusing on. From a website perspective, that's a much more diverse constituency. As a law enforcement agency, as a regulatory agency, There are many different external parties that we serve. We serve state and local law enforcement. We provide services like firearms tracing and a variety of other services to state and local law enforcement. But then on the regulatory side of things, we serve the firearms industry, the explosives industry, and all of them come to us and come to our website for distinctly different reasons. And so one of the things that we're looking at is, as you heard this morning, and you've probably seen some other examples with the FCC and others, really restructuring our website to make it more customizable, more personalizable, such that if I'm an explosives licensee, I can come to the website and rapidly find those things that are of interest specifically to me, as opposed to trying to navigate through things that really don't pertain to me. So those are the different constituencies that we're trying to address.
I think from a Census Bureau perspective, mobile means several different things. So mobile in terms of what are people trying to do with their mobile devices when they come to census.gov, or information they might want to look up on a road versus on a desktop unit. Certainly with traffic patterns being what they are, we know more and more people are coming to our site using mobile devices. So we've been trying to render as much information that fits on a 2.5-inch screen, or more specifically maybe a tablet, that makes sense. So we can't open up the fire hose on a 2.5-inch screen and show you all our data. So we kind of have to do some picking and choosing. What are those high priority data sets and information that people are looking for? A lot of people know we do the once-a-decade census. They don't know that we measure the economy. So any of the tools that we're trying to develop, an economic dashboard that now rests on our homepage, may be converted into a mobile app that shows America's economy. And so you can check back in, you can set it into your calendar. What are those features of the phone that you want to have that you're usually using, and how do we harness those to deliver the message? Another important audience for the Census Bureau is that mobile skews very heavily with minority and ethnic audiences. So when we're doing outreach around the census or around some of our other surveys so we can increase our response rates, that saves taxpayers money, we want to make sure that we're keeping that in mind as well. So it's eliminated the digital divide to some degree from the Census Bureau perspective and how we can reach out. And we also have the enterprise side where we have field representatives or census takers doing 120 annual surveys across the country every year. How do we use mobile devices to better create efficiencies with the work that we did and the work that they want to do, to where maybe as they're interfacing with a household, if we have a right mobile device with the right content, if they're having difficulty with that interview, maybe they could watch a quick 60-second video, or maybe they have some information relative to that community that they can show them right there on that device that may make that difference for a household to respond to a survey.
And for us, we looked, it's mission driven. So while we secure all modes of transportation, there's 1.8 million people coming through the airport every day. And we have limited resources for the contact center. So there are certain hours it's running. We find with hits, we can look at our web hits and see what pages people were hitting. Getting feedback from our officers, we can see what the mistakes people make over and over and over and say, I had no idea. And so what mobile enabled us to do is reach people at a moment. We find that people are calling an hour or two before they leave their house. Well, what if they have a 6 a.m. flight? And now at the moment you're packing your bag is when you're like, I wonder if I can bring this. And, or people are traveling. It's not when you're leaving your house and you're taking your stuff. It's you're in Napa and you're about to buy a case of wine. I want you to know at the winery that you cannot bring that in your carry-on, because I don't want you angry at the checkpoint that you now are stuck. So that was a driver for us. And then thinking of other audiences, we deal with first responders. We can look at that down the road. Our own employees is figuring out a way. It's a challenge when you have 50,000 people who don't sit at a computer. How you push information to them, both from a security standpoint and don't overload them, but get them the right info they need. And so we kind of do it on a mission, break out the mission on where's the best bang for the buck, so that you're not just throwing a bunch of stuff out there and churning and burning our IT department.
And for those of you in the audience who may be with agencies and care to respond to any of these questions that are being posed to the panel as well, as the audience, don't just ask questions, feel free to say, how it's changing your view of what audience you're trying to reach as well. So, do we have any other questions right now?
Rick, back to your question on servicing your workforce. As far as the BYOD, bring your own device, What are the preliminary security concerns that you're having to deal with, or what are the policy steps you're taking there?
Well, we're in that context really just getting kind of our feet wet. We believe we've identified some technologies that would more readily lend themselves to a BYOD scenario, in the sense that we could give our employees access to enterprise information on a device that they own, but in a way that doesn't require us to care much about what is happening with the rest of the device. So that's kind of the elegant balance to strike there, where we're not trying to manage their device, we're not trying to take control of their device, we're not going to be in a scenario where we might have to wipe their entire device, because we've limited the ways in which they access enterprise data to a couple of different technologies. And some of it's sandbox technology, and there are a number of other agencies that are also testing, and I mentioned the technology is good. Using that as a secure container on the device to access enterprise email and contacts and calendar and those kinds of things. And then also using virtualization technology to provide access to legacy enterprise applications or desktop for richer types of functionality. And that's actually a model that a lot of other federal agencies are also experimenting with. I know actually the White House, the Executive Office of the President, is experimenting with that same set of technologies. So that seems to be the kind of comfortable level of technology in which you can give employees access, whether it's a mobile device, whether frankly it's their home PC, and do so in such a way that you're less concerned about the other activities on the device, because those two technologies are secure and they don't leave unprotected data on a personal device. The challenge, of course, is that they don't allow you to take full advantage of all the functionality on the device. So particularly on mobile devices, if you're looking for the full rich interactivity that people are expecting on the mobile device, where you can use the GPS and the camera and voice recognition and all that kind of thing, that's not perfectly enabled by those two technologies. So it's a quick solution for a BYOD scenario. It's not necessarily the most richly functional solution, but it's an easy one right now.
Andy Robinson with ICF. I'm following up on the BYOD concept. What is your procurement policy for these devices? Are you buying them for the employees now, or are they bringing them? Do you see a shift down the road?
Both. So when it comes to mobile devices, if we are expecting an employee to interact with a mobile environment, we will buy that device for them. And a couple of reasons for that. One, if it's what we believe to be an inherent part of their job, then that's a technology we should be paying for and providing for them. But also, we want to be able to manage that device because it allows us to put more functionality on the device, more enterprise data on the device. It allows us to make that device act more like a part of our enterprise. And that gives us the ability to deliver better functionalities to the user, which in the end makes a more useful device to the user. So for those kinds of devices where they're mission critical, they need to contain mission critical functionality, we'll pay for those devices, we'll provision them, we'll control them, we'll manage them, we'll wipe them if we need to, if they get compromised, etc. For the BYOD scenario, my philosophy, and our philosophy at least, is if it's BYOD, then it's your own device, and I'm not going to pay for any of it. So that's a scenario in which that's kind of, I'm giving you the ability to bring your own device, which means you have the flexibility to bring whatever technology you have, whether it's a Macintosh or a home PC or whatever. But I'm not going to pay for any of that technology. That's an additional enablement I'm offering, but inherently I'm not trying to take control of that device. I'm not trying to pay for it.
And I'll just add that I think the momentum has swung over the last just 2 years in terms of this whole philosophy of bring your own device and what you can do on your personal device versus not. Right Rose in the census, we have a social media program going on, and I've got my social media leads responding to the whole country about what's going on with the census. And we have Blackberries, and the Blackberries were not really helping us do our jobs very well on the social media front. So they're using their own iPhone or Androids. But our social media policy was such that said you shouldn't be using your own devices to access the social channels. Well, we had to ignore that for that time period to get the job done. But working along with IT, now that we have devices that are able to be provisioned and sort of leased out to the employees so they can understand how to use them a little bit more appropriately if they don't have their own device. So that's key not only for social media, but also very key in web development and trying to understand as you're developing things, how are they looking and how are the interactions? Are they taking advantage of all the unique aspects of that particular device?
Stephen, you were talking earlier about how your agency is working on an API right now.
Yep.
And, I'm really interested, maybe you could talk a little bit about that, but I'm also curious, creating APIs is a huge technical challenge, but it's also kind of a cultural shift in that we're not trying to deliver, X, mobile app. We're trying to deliver X that enables A, B, C, D, E, F, G for future mobile apps. So maybe you could talk about kind of that mindset for agencies.
Yeah, I think the key thing here is that the Census Bureau, since 1790, has been putting things into very specific tables. And we have some subject matter people that I think were around during the first census that were also still putting them in that same table. And they own that data. They are very appropriate all over. They want to own that data, and you're not going to change the way they want to feel about it. But yet we have this technology that now enables us to do so much more with those statistics. So you don't have to go look up table B317-8, and believe me, there are people that know that table number specifically. You want people to be able to search that data on your site or on a mobile device and find that answer. It's the Google influence, it's the browser influence, they want immediate information. And so opening up the data and having it in a structured format that enables others to do something with it enhances the value of your agency, and particularly with the Census Bureau, the statistics that we collect. So we can either stay in the old way of doing things, which was publishing magnetic tapes and then big books. How many of you have heard about the statistical abstract? 100 years running, the statistical abstract. It got defunded. 100 years. Librarians went nuts. They love these things. Well, we're trying to create that statistical abstract, which is a compilation of all the statistics of the federal government in a book about this big, into multiple databases that we can call from APIs and things like that, to where we can make it more of an online product, something that's really worthy of sort of where we're at with technology today. We're not there yet, but we're working on that. But getting to the API, we're beta testing right now. We hope to have released probably by the end of the month a API that dives into all of the 2010 census data and a big survey called the American Community Survey. Together, that's what gives you the information about the population and what's going on in the country down to very, very small levels of geography, down to like neighborhood level. So our API can deliver all of that information to where developers can then take it and do something with it. So we have a beta web application that we built that is basically an age population finder. So one of the most frequently things people come to our site to look at is the population finder. But they also want to look up how many people are of this age. Well, right now we only have tables that say ages 0 to 5 or 5 to 9, and then every once in a while we'll put out single year estimates for various age groups. Well, this population finder, you can basically go in, it's calling on the API into the database and pulling it back out, and it gives you all the number of people in the U.S. that are a certain age group. Or you can build your own range. So now you can have customizable age ranges. So if you want to see 18 and under, or 18 to 24, which is a key demographic, but we don't split it out that way on our tables right now. A lot of marketers do. So that will enable them to do that. That was just one example that we wanted to show, and we're doing the same thing with mobile apps. You got to show people, lead them to water a little bit to understand the value and the range of what can be done with your information. Give them the example, and then let them follow with all the creativity, because there's a lot more creativity outside the Census Bureau than there is internally when you start looking at crowdsourcing.
So does that mean that you're not publishing your data on Howard cards anymore?
No, absolutely. The Holler cards are long gone. They're in the library somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah, and frankly, we have a similar use case on a much smaller scale for some of the data that we publish as an organization. Every year we publish an annual set of information about firearms tracing, which for a variety of reasons we have to abstract up to the statistical level, but it's a set of data that's got a lot of interest from a number of different constituencies. And the way we publish that data today is rather appalling. It's a PDF. So it's the antithesis of usable data. But instead, what we get is a lot of FOIA requests for the actual data and having it sliced and diced in a variety of different ways, all for different constituencies, whether it's the news media, whether it's foundations, whether it's non-governmental organizations. They each want to kind of see it differently. So then that creates work for us, where we have to regenerate the data according to the query that they wanted to see, that kind of thing. And that creates a lot of work for us. So, back to Stephen's point, if we were to publish that data, we're working on this, publishing that data as an API, so that it's just out there and it's available for consumers, however they want to use it, whatever they want to do with it. Ultimately, it reduces the burden on us to keep responding to all these requests. and makes the data much more readily consumable, usable, and as you said, allows for greater creativity in what's done with that data.
You mentioned about these opportunities also enable you to create new interagency monetization. You can look at new business models as you're publishing information. So what is your strategy? And even from a cultural standpoint, what is your strategy in terms of looking at new business models as you are mobilizing, digitizing this information, publishing, and doing and enabling basically some of the state and local agencies in your case? Is there a chargeback? Are you looking into new business models?
Not necessarily new business models in that sense. A lot of the services that we've historically provided to state and local law enforcement are frankly at no charge. And I don't really see that necessarily changing immediately, but there are clearly opportunities for making the services that we provide to state and local law enforcement much more seamless and much more readily integrated with other services. So, for example, we have firearms tracing services that we provide to state and local law enforcement. There are other similar related services that the FBI provides, obviously, through the Criminal Justice Information Services Division, where, for example, if there is a stolen firearm, that needs to get reported to the FBI through CJIS and NCIC, the National Crime Information Center. At the same time, most law enforcement also wants to trace that firearm. Right now, there's no way to do that seamlessly. So right now, you have to enter the firearm as stolen one place, and you have to trace it somewhere else. You have to re-enter that information. That's a lot of friction for law enforcement. So clearly, there's some opportunities there to say, all right, you can enter information about a firearm once, and it's both reported as stolen for purposes of law enforcement, and it can also be traced using the same basic information. So there are clearly opportunities like that where we can make the services that we deliver to state and local law enforcement across DOJ, across the federal government, much more seamless.
We have a question in the back corner there.
Good morning. How has the demand for mobility shaped SLAs, both real or implied?
Yeah, pass it.
Wow. Can you elaborate a little bit, SLAs in
Well, SLAs both for the end user or the consumer and back at the enterprise, since it's enterprise data. I just wonder if it's made a change to your SLAs.
Yeah, I would say it hasn't noticeably yet. I think it certainly changed expectations from users, but I wouldn't necessarily say that those are translated into SLAs. I mean, I think the same basic SLAs in the enterprise still pertain in terms of availability of information and that sort of thing, but I wouldn't say that those have noticeably changed substantially just as a result of mobility. I think there are increasing expectations, which are a little bit more qualitative, in terms of where and when our employees are able to access that information. And so, they are looking and expecting much more to be able to interact with enterprise data in a more seamless fashion, independent of where they are. And they'd like to be able to do that without, as they historically had to do in our case, pulling out a laptop and booting up a laptop and connecting to a wireless network and then launching a VPN and doing a whole variety of things that creates a long lead time to getting to information. So to the extent that that constitutes an SLA, from when I want to get the data to when I can actually access it, yes, the expectation is that that's a much shorter time frame. Whether that's on a mobile device, whether that's on, frankly, any device like a home computer, I think those expectations are certainly changing. And we, I think, feel the obligation to respond to that in terms of making that whole process much more compressed and much more easy for the end user.
I also wonder if the digital strategy's suggestion of a FedRAMP for mobile, sort of like it was for cloud, may provide some clarity for agencies on SLAs there. Question mark.
I think it could, yeah. I think the way that the FedRAMP element of the digital government strategy was originally kind of cast or envisioned was as we start adopting mobile solutions in the federal government, to the extent that we can make those federally accredited types of solutions, that's all to our advantage, so that we're not, as individual federal agencies, going through that same process of trying to figure out what constitutes a secure mobile solution, and rather you've got a more a clearinghouse type approach for those kinds of solutions. I don't know that necessarily it was intended to address SLAs in kind of an operational sense, but certainly I would say SLAs in the sense of what constitutes a secure solution.
Mhm.
Thank you. Bill Hawking with the Ken Blanchard Company. I'd like to kind of change the focus and ask you all a question, all three of you, about the focus that we all have about recognizing and valuing the most important assets that we all have, which is our people. A lot of the feedback that we're getting is that people, in a lot of cases, don't feel as valued as they should be because technology doesn't enable them access to learning as easily as they need in order to be effective in their jobs. So whether it's teaching them how to be an employee or teaching them how to be better leaders, my question to you guys is, how do you see the agencies changing with access to information and access to learning through mobile devices as a mechanism or enablement for valuing your people so that they learn how to be on the job, or they learn how to be better leaders, or all of it?
For us, I think that's a huge because we balance, it's mission critical. So if you are on the front line and don't know why you're doing what you're doing, you won't do it as well as you possibly could. And when you have an entire field organization, there may be pockets of greatness in communications, in value, in culture, and there may be pockets that aren't as good. And so when we're looking at whether it's a mobile app or mobile access for our employees, that's one of the most critical parts is how do we continue to let you know you are valued by the information we are giving you, because I think that there's a critical tie. If we didn't care about you, we wouldn't communicate with you. And where our challenge is when we ask our workforce a lot of the time, a lot of their learning is online learning, and they will say, I want face-to-face learning. I want to talk to someone. And when you dig deeper, it's, do you want to talk to them in person? Would it be okay if it was video-based, but someone's talking maybe as opposed to video-based and you're looking at a PowerPoint presentation or something? But we're trying through mobile to figure out how you do convey how much you care in how you communicate, in giving them more opportunities and what you communicate to them. If it's an app or something, it's going to be short, it's going to be quick, versus telling it. But our workforce, they have small pockets of time. So that's why I'm really excited about, I think our external mobile definitely is a passenger, but for the internal is driving that culture of you are a valued part of this organization and this is how we're going to communicate with you so you understand.
Yeah, I'll echo that. I think that unless you're developing something that answers somebody's need for a more efficient process of the information they're looking for, so it's more task-based. Technology for technology's sake or mobile for mobile's sake is just a waste of time. If it makes my job harder, then why are you doing it? And I think with our staff that we have outside doing the census taking, we're doing the surveys, as well as the staff that is in the office-based structure, we have to think about things that enable them to do their job more efficiently. Why? Workforce is shrinking. You have more work to do and less time to do it. So don't make it complicated. If it needs an instruction booklet, you probably shouldn't do it. So make sure that you're looking at what are those core things they need help with. And if you can help them do it, you'll be their new best friend. But don't make it overly complicated because most people don't have time to learn these things that are overly complicated. Any Apple device does not come with instructions. There's a reason for the penetration within the Apple market is because it's so easy. And I think the government sometimes, because of all the processes and regulations, everything, overdoes some things to where they overcomplicate a very simple thing. So keep it simple.
Yeah, I would obviously agree with that in the sense that we should all aspire to tools and technology that require as little training on the tools and technology as possible. I think back to what I think you were asking about, just in general opportunities for communication and learning among employees. In our particular case, that's something that we've already invested a fair amount in terms of a learning management system and some online capabilities, and giving our employees access to training opportunities wherever and whenever. And that has a natural extension into the mobile environment, and some of the technology that we've used logically extends into the mobile environment, so they have even more ready access to those kinds of courses and information and training. And our current director has also emphasized, back to your point about just making employees feel valued, has very much emphasized much more interactive communication with our employees in terms of, videos and messaging and a variety of other things to make them feel more engaged, to make them feel more a part of where the organization is going, how they contribute to the organization's mission. And that gets back to the point of making our web presence, both internally and externally, a more effective means and a channel for that communication, so that becomes a much more effective medium to convey some of those messages and to give them, frankly, some of the opportunity to interact back to some of those messages, which we historically haven't necessarily been very good at. So making that more of a two-way conversation, or even a multi-part conversation to allow the employees to interact with themselves more readily.
Hi, I'm Hillary Gazzola with Accenture. Kind of following on that question, you mentioned, Lynn, cultural transformation, and we talked a lot about technology, but obviously, especially with the workforces that you all have to represent, a lot of people, a lot of diversity there. I would love to hear about some of the challenges that you all have encountered related to instituting these kind of changes, going to more technology, going to mobile technology, and how you all have dealt with those.
Well, I know it definitely with a diverse workforce. So I think for us, the communications challenge is it's not, we'll say in security language, there's no silver bullet. There's not one thing to do everything, and that's key here too. When we reached out to both private sector and government organizations that had a same spread out workforce, not sitting in a computer, the communications tools vary from some places hand out a piece of paper every day to this day and will say, by the nature we have to do it. Others will say, because, if you're a UPS driver, you don't want to be having your drivers looking at a mobile device while driving. So that may be, they're getting a shift brief before they go out. And so for us, I think if we announced on one day, or effective today, we're going to a completely mobile, we have half of our workforce have a collective anxiety attack. And so I think the way I look at it is you're trying to drag some along while you're getting some so excited, and then anytime you get a little quick win, you communicate it out so that you're dragging more with you. And so for us, we still do shift briefs. We still have static web content. We still do a webcast, or our administrator visits and airport talks. But in every different communication tool we're doing, we talk about other options they have, and we ask them for options. And I think getting their feedback and their buy-in, we're looking at, new people that are coming to our organization, can be 18 years old. That they're very different than a 55-year-old. And even in IT, I think it's the challenge of having people in the IT organization that understand a lot of this. We balance people who think social media is a fad and it's going to be over, like 2 years ago, according to a conversation I had once. It's going to be over in a year, with people going, this isn't a joke, this is going to change. We have to keep up with it. Because if we don't keep up, we're losing our employees, we're losing public, we're not where they are already talking. So I think it's you manage little projects with quick wins. Every time our app gets mentioned somewhere or someone talks about using it, we put it through so that people get that it's not just a toy that we made for somebody who might think it's like a video game. It's not a video game. This, we can show an efficiency in that maybe less people will call our contact center and it will save us money. So I think you have to push it for wins.
I think from a mobile device, I'll just jump in here real quick. So during the 2010 census, we had our first foray into handheld computers on two different fronts. We literally had to walk every single street across the country and align each housing structure with a GPS coordinate. That made a little angst with some people out there that said the government was putting a red dot on their door. But there's part of counting the population is you have to assign them to a geography. So it's a population census and a housing census all at the same time. So they literally had to walk every single street and ascertain a GPS coordinate for each housing unit as we made sure we had a complete inventory of 120 million housing units across the country. and the range of the worker. We had to hire over 800,000 workers throughout the census, and we would have these large peak periods where we'd bring them in, we'd recruit them, we'd train them, and then they would sit idle for weeks at a time waiting for an operation to come around out of their local census office. So we constantly had to go back and retrain workers, and some people would go out one day and say, this is not for me. I don't like doing this work. They drop off, we have to bring somebody else in, and we got to go right back to it. So there's a lot of verbatim training, which is painful, but it is effective, so somebody can read it. It's a different learning style. But then they also had management structures in place where you had a local crew leader and then a supervisor above that would work and review caseloads based on how they were performing. At the same time, we're using the technology to run diagnostics on, are there any pain points? And of course there were. It's the largest operation the federal government does. So we had to do a lot of patches with those handhelds. And sometimes they would, freezing screen. Well, why was that? So maybe it was a bad device or maybe not. We also had to look about securing the device. So there was a lot of that, and just getting that across workers that were in college as a temporary job, or retirees that didn't even had a bag phone back in the day. So how do you really get them all trained up at different user spaces was a very big challenge. But you do have to mitigate it with a thorough training program and then checkpoints, and you have to manage it by looking at what the numbers are coming in.
I think we have a slightly different issue in our organization where, frankly, we were struggling to keep up with the demand from our users for this kind of technology. And that was kind of ironic in the sense that a lot of it was coming from our law enforcement agents, a lot of it was also coming from our industry operations investigators. But despite the fact that they're I think we're the most senior law enforcement agency in the federal government, so we have the oldest agents in the federal government. All of them took to this technology so quickly, it was unbelievable. Because they saw through some pilot efforts and some other things that we did, the possibility that this technology represented. And at that point, it became almost, almost a demand that we were not able to meet fast enough. And so we just recently actually released 2,400 iPhones to all of our special agents, and that's been a hugely popular thing for them because they view that as such an improvement in capability in their hands. And again, as Stephen mentioned, it's intuitive, it's not something that requires a huge amount of training, and it brings to them such a great set of capabilities that it's been, frankly, a huge morale improvement for them that they now have this capability in their hands. The wrinkle that we have in moving to more electronic, more mobile-enabled processes is, frankly, less cultural and more legislative. Ironically, we've got a lot of business processes in our organization that are legislated to be paper-based. So that becomes more competitive for us in terms of how we move all of our processes to a truly paperless electronic environment, is we have to overcome some statutory provisions that preclude that in some cases.
Great. We have a question over here and then one over here.
Hi, this is Laura Sergilli with North Island. Just continuing on this whole workforce issue, we've heard shrinking workforce, we've heard cost reduction. How are you guys measuring the efficiency gains that you're seeing with all this new technology in terms of what that means from a resource allocation, resource management perspective, from a federal workforce standpoint?
Well, right now our mobile is only external. So the way we are measuring it is, we can see downloads, we can see usage, to see how effective it is. We also look at our contact center to see what are the trends. Are the phone calls or emails going down? Are they changing? Because then we know we have to adjust the app. So if there are less phone calls on some of the higher feature things of the app, then we know, okay, we need to change and add things. Is it working? Because down the road, I would like to drive it where it's self-help. And I think it's hard to tell with our web and calls to figure out, is it a generational thing? Are younger people just doing it themselves, and our callers still the older callers that maybe aren't going to get on a website or aren't going to pull something on their tools? So those are the ways we're looking at it externally. Internally, we're just still in the asking the workforce what's going to work, trying to figure out a tool, and we have the challenge of balancing the security with the information, because some of the information we have is sensitive, and it's just made it a little more challenging.
Yeah, I'll just add that will not exist. Because left unchecked, information companies, Google and others, they're going to search and find an answer to our data, and people won't even know it came from the Census Bureau. And when you come to the collection of those statistics, that's where we have to really improve. And are there techniques that we can get the same type of statistics that are publicly available data sets now to improve the timeliness of some of these estimates? So with the handheld computers that we went into 2010, there was a lot of benefits that we knew would take place because it wasn't just a collection device, it was also an HR device. So they were able to add all their payroll stuff, and it went seamlessly into the payroll system rather than having to fill out a form, fax it back to one office, that office sent it to a regional office, the regional office then put it into a system that then went to headquarters. So there were a lot of efficiencies that were created, so we can certainly track those savings. And I think with any other future mobile device or anything we're doing out in the field with mobile collections, we certainly have to be able to track those things. And then from a pure analytics standpoint, we have got to do a better job of looking across all of the customer feedback that we're getting into a central repository of data and then using that intelligence to make some kind of decision. So we're really standing up a pretty steep and dense analytics center within the Census Bureau that's looking at all channels of communications coming in, whether it be through the website, the call centers, constituent emails, congressional inquiries, field rep interactions where a household says, get off my property or I'm going to shoot you. We then have one of these licenses done. We don't talk ATF. But with all this, the thing that's over everything we have to do mobile, if it's an enterprise, is confidentiality of the data. So we have to take that so strong at the Census Bureau because the moment we don't protect your data, the moment the households, the residents lose faith in the information they're providing, some of which is very sensitive. So we're mandated by law to protect that. And it's at the forefront of everything we do. So if we can't protect it, we're not going to do it. Even if it makes technology sense, if we can't absolutely say it's going to be locked down, we're not going to do it. And you can see how that will really hurt on the creativity because there's a lot of things that you can't guarantee. But with confidentiality, we have to.
Yeah, and to your point about measuring productivity, frankly, that's a challenge, for us in particular. And a lot of the productivity-related benefits are more anecdotal or intuitive, I'll call them. And sort of like, I'll draw the analogy to, what was the productivity gained by giving everyone a BlackBerry? And I don't know that any of us actually measured that, but we sort of intuitively got that it made us more productive. The difference in this environment that we're trying to institutionalize is getting a much better handle on the cost of all this technology. And so, today, as I alluded to earlier, today we're providing all of almost all of our employees laptops. We're giving most of them BlackBerries or other mobile devices. So we're giving them a fairly expensive set of technology. And what we need to look at is that the right set of technology given all of the other capabilities that are now available today? And can we perhaps change that mix of technologies such that we can either keep the cost same or drive them down and still give them better tools to get their job done? And that's really what we're looking at is more, kind of the cost side of the equation. What can we do to make the costs more affordable while still delivering greater productivity to the workers?
I would like to bring you back to this question of mobile computing and security. What are you doing to first protect a smartphone, for example, from getting infected by some bad code? And two, how do you monitor? What are the kind of tools that you're using to monitor the device, assuming that somehow that you've got infected by the intruder?
Right. Well, today, the tools that we're using on our mobile devices are a couple of different things. So I mentioned, we're using secure sandbox technology, and that's right now what we're using for all of our special agents. Where the enterprise data that we're putting on the device is in a secure container. It's isolated from the rest of the device, and if we need to, we can kill that part of the device. We're also using mobile device management software to monitor and control the overall configuration of the device. What we'd like to do ultimately, if we can, and there's some FIPS 140 and other kind of security considerations at play there, we would like to be able to securely manage the entire device so that we can deliver content and data on the device and manage the entire device securely. But mobile device management software gives a lot of capability in terms of monitoring what's going on with the device, whitelisting and blacklisting of applications that a user can or cannot install on the device, gives the ability to remotely wipe the entire device if necessary. We had an anecdote that's been documented in the media where we actually had someone leave an iPad on an airplane, and through some of the mobile device management software, we were able to actually locate the device, remotely wipe it, and also go and retrieve it because we knew physically where it was located. So not only do we not compromise the device or the data, we actually got the device back as well. So there are some capabilities like that out there that frankly are better than what you have today on a laptop, for example, where I don't necessarily have the same capability to find and wipe a device like that as I do with some mobile devices.
We're doing pretty much the same thing at Census. If I could only use some of that MDM technology for my daughter's iPhone, I think that made me happy, but we're doing pretty much the same thing.
Can you talk about the level of coordination? You guys represent three different agencies. What kind of coordination is happening in terms of exchanging some of those ideas between interagency, mobility, idea exchange, and creating those kind of solutions that can be leveraged down the road? That's the first part of the question. Second is also related to workforce. You talk about, that there's a digital strategy that's being pushed down, coming from the CIO shop. How much is being driven, and you talked a little bit about it, how much is being driven from bottom up in each of the respective organizations, considering that each of the workforce is different?
Well, to answer both parts of your question, I think the information exchange and sharing that's occurring today is still largely relation-based and ad hoc. And so, it depends on events like this. It depends on, either pre-existing relationships or, chance meetings, that kind of thing, to allow a lot of the information exchange to occur. And what you saw in the digital government strategy is trying to institutionalize that more and put in place the mechanisms to foster more of that sharing in a more structured way. And that was really the incentive behind the Digital Services Innovation Center and the Digital Services Advisory Group, is to identify much more across the federal government what is going on, what are some of the things that we can leverage or elevate to be federal initiatives, what are some of the things we can reuse across the federal government, and really expose a lot more of that in a more, I'll call it structured way, but just a more open way, using some sort of platform to share all that information and make that much more readily available so it isn't dependent on individual relationships. And I think, frankly, a lot of that was driven from the bottom up. Both parts of the digital government strategy, the kind of web-oriented part of it and the mobility-oriented part of it, both of that was based on the work of task forces that represented practitioners from across the federal government. So many of the elements of the digital government strategy were actually practitioner-based initiatives where it was the people who were actually trying to do this stuff in federal agencies telling the federal CIO and OMB, these are the kind of things we really need to be doing more at the federal government level as opposed to individually as agencies, and we need to have better mechanisms to enable that to occur.
Yeah, I would update on that. The siloed nature of just one agency within its own agency. Use the Census Bureau as an example. Everybody is very focused on what they're doing, and to lift their heads up to understand that there are a lot of other things going on within the agency is a big enough challenge. Then you have to report up to the parent agency, usually a cabinet level agency, the Department of Commerce, and so trying to interact with the department as well as the other bureaus within the agencies. And now we're opening it up to the rest of the federal government and how do we information share. So I think we've made a lot of progress, and I think the CIOs in particular around the federal agencies have made a much more concerted effort from my observations in terms of sharing information, certainly around the cloud and some other mobile device, bring your own device. A lot more conversations going on in the federal sphere on that. I tend to see less on the communication side, on the business enterprise. What does it really mean? The dissemination aspect of it for the public-facing side. And I think the digital strategy really puts those on par, saying you can have the technology, but if you're not thinking about the customer with the endpoint, then you're going to lose a lot. So I'm encouraged by seeing a lot of that, and certainly interactions such as these, but also a lot of the other groups that you can belong to understand and try to communicate. Again, using technology to be able to communicate with each other, I think will help benefit all of us, because if we can start sharing some of those pain points and giving you a template, well, here's how you get the terms of service through your general counsel without trying to fight the Apple terms of service that GSA already negotiated. or, hey, yeah, here's how you want to do this type of development. Those are all things that create efficiencies. And I think that's what the taxpayers are looking for, and it's certainly something that we all should be striving for because it makes our job easier and we can spend more time on creative thinking and coming up with better solutions for government for our citizens.
And that was going to be my point exactly on the terms of service. So for us with the mobile app, we had a community we could talk to. It was at the time that the GSA was doing the mobile app gallery. So we came together as a group, a bunch of us that were developing them, and started saying, you know, what are you doing? How are you doing it? A lot of us had legal challenges. So the level of conversation, that part bubbled up so that we got a little more help with that because, you know, we figured out how to develop the apps and we can't get them in iTunes so that people can use them. And I find whether it's through, there's some listservs, there's some groups that are formed we meet at conferences, it's like a magnet starts pulling you, or someone will say, hey, you've got to talk to Rick Colgate if you're doing this, and you've got to talk to so-and-so at GSA or USDA. And here's who's doing stuff, and you're either drawn to one another or you're pushed into one another to kind of, you know, sometimes it is truly a commiseration section of here's all the problems we have. But invariably, someone has figured out something. We became one of the people, the go-to on legal because our lawyers have helped us through every tool we've done, and they understand risk, they understand the benefit to the user and to TSA, and so sometimes we'll get calls saying, will your chief counsel please call my chief counsel? And she will. And I think it's been baby steps and it's been a little bit informal, but it has become kind of a support group where you just after a while know who you need to call.
Well, thank you all for your questions and for participating, and please join me in thanking the panel, Rick,